300-pound dudes tackling you on a frozen field, the last thing you want to do is stay out there. Believe me, the Rams players were thinking about the jacuzzi at their team hotel, that they find it laughable, but more laughable if they totally disregard the trade whatsoever. This guy has transformed the balance of power in the Eastern Conference. And you could argue the entire defense is going to be absolutely ferocious next year. But if your number one priority is to win a Super Bowl, then J.J. Watt is making a grave mistake. To ride this Chad Henne experiment for an entire game, I might need a whole bottle of Hennessy just to get through that. Guy who's won 8 division titles, who's made 5 AFC championship appearances, who's reached the Super Bowl 3 times and has won 2 Super Bowls for this organization. Aaron Rodgers has only won 1 Super Bowl with Green Bay. Drew Brees has only won 1 Super Bowl with New Orleans. There's only 13 quarterbacks in NFL history that have won multiple Super Bowls, and Big Ben is one of those individuals. Good morning and welcome to Morning Joe right here on J&J Media Network, Facebook Live, Twitter, and on YouTube. I'm Jonah Malkin with you every single Monday and Wednesday morning, 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 to 11 Central, and 8 to 9 a.m. Pacific. Glad to have you with me on this Wednesday morning. A lot to discuss, previewing NBA Finals Game 3, the Angels going in a different direction, and my Malkin's moments. I got some really historic Malkin's moments you're not going to want to miss. But I have to start with the NFL. Some big news finally out of Denver, Colorado. It's official. It's finally official. The Denver Broncos have officially been sold. The Walter Penner family group finally came in what seemed like the 11th hour and got a deal done to purchase the Denver Broncos for a record margin, $4.65 billion. It's the most ever for a U.S. sports franchise. Obviously, Rob Walton, he's going to be the acting owner. The Walton family is going to be the primary ownership group. And for some context, Walton's father, Sam Walton, the late Sam Walton, was the founder of Walmart, the huge retail conglomerate. And in addition, for Rob Walton, again, it's important to know all the context here because when you're purchasing sports franchises, when they're sold, the seller wants to know everything about the buyer. Normally, these are long-lasting family-run businesses for years and years and years. And Rob Walton is the 17th wealthiest man in the world. He is valued at about $68.5 billion, give or take a couple cents. And his cousin Ann is actually married to Stan Kroenke, who is the owner of the LA Rams. So this is a family that has had close ties to sports franchises before. Now, for the longest time, there was a huge, long legal battle that eventually got resolved. Initially, the late Canadian-American financier, Edgar Kaiser Jr., he was the owner of the Denver Broncos, and he sold the franchise to Pat Bowlen in 1984. Now, to maintain their initially agreed upon right to first refusal, when Pat Bowlen decided to turn around and resell the Denver Broncos several years ago, initially, Edgar Kaiser Jr. maintained under the right to first refusal the option of buying it back. Now, a judge ruled that that agreement was no longer valid. And so Pat Bowlen had to turn around in 2014, and he ultimately relinquished control of the franchise to Joe Ellis because he was battling Alzheimer's, and he unfortunately passed away. Pat Bowlen did in 2019. So now Joe Ellis has officially sold it to the Walton Penner family. So here's the interesting thing, though, about the Denver Broncos, because unlike many other NFL franchises in major cities, the Denver Broncos are a really unique NFL franchise, because obviously the city of Denver is a fantastic, flourishing, and vibrant metropolis in the Mountain West. But when we think about sports franchises and the cities that they're in, most of the time people and athletes aren't looking at the Denver Nuggets in basketball or the Denver or the Colorado Rockies in baseball as particularly glamorous destinations. It's not that they aren't enjoyable cities, but it's not like free agents are necessarily demanding that they be traded to Denver. And case in point, Carmelo Anthony used to be a part of the Denver Nuggets back in the heyday in 2000, in the mid to later 2000s. Demanded specifically a trade to the New York Knicks. So he was traded there. You had Nolan Arenado, who was traded to the St. Louis Cardinals in baseball. You had Trevor Story decide to not sign a long-term deal with the Rockies, and he wanted out, and he ended up signing as a free agent with the Boston Red Sox. So he moved away. And these are major names in that market. So the reason I bring that up is because for whatever reason, the Denver Broncos have managed to distance itself and separate itself from basketball, from baseball, and still be viewed in a glowing light as a prestigious franchise. And that's something that is extremely rare to be able to accomplish. To distinguish yourself as an upscale franchise, despite the fact that two other major sports organizations within your same city can't accomplish that same feat. Because when you look at the Denver Broncos, they've had a propensity of signing some major names. Obviously, recently, Peyton Manning between 2012, 2015, and now Russell Wilson. These are two major free agent names that they have brought in, obviously slightly different stages of their careers. But this is a franchise that is a particularly profitable NFL organization. Because you look at when Peyton Manning joined, 2012 to 2015. He was only there for 4 years. And yet the Broncos reached 2 Super Bowls. They won 1 Super Bowl in the 2015-2016 season. That's when they defeated Cam Newton in his MVP year. The defense really kind of carried the day for Peyton Manning, which he does not shy away from giving them credit. And ironically enough, the other Super Bowl that they participated in, they were defeated by Russell Wilson and the Seattle Seahawks' vaunted Legion of Boom defense in the 2013-2014 season. They got walloped like 43-8 in that matchup. But the difference was Peyton Manning, when he joined, was 36 years old. He played from 36 to 39. You fast forward to now, and how profitable they were then. This is an organization that has missed the playoffs in 6 straight postseasons. And yet, according to Forbes and their initial appraisal of the Denver Broncos back in August, this was an organization that was valued at around $3.75 billion, which was the 10th highest valuation amongst all 32 NFL teams. Now you're bringing in Russell Wilson. So again, the last 6 years, they haven't accomplished anything in the postseason. They haven't even reached the postseason, and that's already their evaluation. Now you bring in a guy in Russell Wilson who's just 33 years old, and the way that this guy takes care of his body, the amount of money that he invests in training, in his diet, in physical therapists, he maintains an incredible level of, or he just keeps himself really in great shape, just like LeBron does. He spends over 7 figures on his body every single year. This is someone who can play at least 5 to 6 more years, at the bare minimum, 5 to 6 more years. So this is a franchise whose value is only going to continue to increase, only going to continue to grow. And especially with the arrival and the presence of Russell Wilson, just going to augment all aspects of the organization. And obviously, from a fan base perspective, it's an incredible fan base. Mile High Stadium is one of the best outdoor football venues in America. You can argue that along with the stadium in Seattle with their 12th man, Denver is right up there for the best outdoor venues, along with Arrowhead Stadium for the Kansas City Chiefs. There are a couple of these places, Green Bay and Lambeau Field, but the Mile High Stadium is one of the best outdoor facilities. And so I think that this is an organization that's just going to continue to skyrocket in valuation. I think it's an incredible sale for Pat Poland and that family, and I guess Joe Ellis as well. But it's kind of hard to believe that after all this time, the Broncos have finally been sold. It feels like it took forever, and now we finally can tie a bow on that sale. Okay. So I want to transition to the NBA and the NBA Finals, specifically Game 3s tonight between the Boston Celtics and the Golden State Warriors. And Game 3s are always one of the most critical games of a series because typically one team's either up 2-0 and have the opportunity to take a commanding 3-0 lead and essentially close the door on a series, or they're tied 1-1, and it's the pivotal third game that either allows the home team to kind of grab hold of all the momentum going into Game 4, or it allows the road team an opportunity to immediately retake home court advantage. And that's the situation that we have right here. And you would think that the Boston Celtics heading into this Game 3 should be the likely favorites. Just played 2 road games. They're going to be returning home to a raucous TD Bank Garden in Boston. And yet, surprisingly and shockingly, the Boston Celtics have really struggled at home in this postseason. Again, they've lost 4 games of 9 total played at TD Garden. They've lost 4 of them. They've lost 4 games already. And when you look at 4 of those losses, 2 of them, or not those 4 losses at home necessarily, but in their last 2 series, they have lost Game 3, specifically in the last 2 series. Against Miami, they lost. It was the first game at home. Jimmy Butler didn't even play in the second half. That's when Bam Adebayo went off for over 30 points. And then versus Milwaukee, they barely lost 103-101. But the point was they lost both of those Game 3s in the last 2 series. Meanwhile, you switch over to the Warriors side, and they've won 2 of 3 Game 3s along their playoff run. The only one they lost was to the Dallas Mavericks on the road. And you could argue that there were some distractions along the way, not to take away anything from Dallas. But they won on the road at Denver to the Warriors back in the first round in Game 3. So for me, I think that the Warriors understand the magnitude of this moment. I think they're going to play with a greater sense of urgency, understanding the importance of not relinquishing any momentum, not allowing Boston to obviously not take a stranglehold, but really move themselves in position with a Game 3 win to kind of take a commanding 3-1 lead after Game 4. I think they understand that. And so I think the Warriors are ultimately going to win this Game 3. I think it's going to be close, probably a score of like 111-105. I think that the Celtics will jump out to a quick start in the first quarter, probably lead 30-22, something like that in the first quarter. But then the Warriors will just continue to chip away, and they'll take the lead in the third quarter, and then they'll ultimately hold on to narrowly escape. I think Klay Thompson has a bounce-back performance. I think he scores 20-plus points tonight. And it's not just because of all these betting outlets setting his number at plus minus 19. But truthfully, I just think that I have too much respect for Klay Thompson and the work that he puts in, where I don't think he's going to have a big game on the road. I just refuse to accept it. I'm never going to bet against him, despite the fact that he is 2 years removed from major scarring injuries. I love the guy's work ethic. I think he's got really strong mental toughness. I think he'll bounce back. Now, here's the other thing to remember. For whatever reason, again, it's kind of inexplicable why this happens, but road teams after they play 2 games on the road, when they come home for that first game, whether it's the playoffs, whether it's the finals, whether it's a regular season game, for whatever reason, they oftentimes struggle in the first half. They're kind of readjusting to their own home rims, to their crowd, which seems to be kind of the antithesis of what should happen. You would think that they would get off on the ground running, and yet that doesn't always happen. Sometimes the home team struggles when they've come off 2 games on the road. So I don't think they're necessarily going to be shooting it particularly well in the first half, at least not in the second quarter. The first quarter they may. But I think the Warriors' shooting is going to prove to be too much. I think this time their backcourt will finally kind of come out together. I think all 3, Curry, Thompson, Poole, will all shoot it. Will all shoot it well. I think 3-point shooting will save the day for the Warriors, and for the first time in this series, it will carry them. But I do think the Celtics will make some adjustments. I think they're finally going to flash Curry on those high pick and rolls. Those bigs are going to switch out onto him and close his airspace. And always nice when you get a phone call mid-show. Apologize for that. I think someone wanted to call in to talk about the Celtics and the Warriors and what they thought and what they think's going to happen. So I do think that some of those adjustments are going to be made. I think, again, they're going to switch on those high pick and rolls for Curry. And I think Rob Williams, while he's not 100%, not anywhere close, I think he'll be a little bit more available. I think he'll play more extended minutes. I think he'll be a lot more effective at containing Kevon Looney. Kevon Looney had a field day in game 2. I don't think that's going to be the case in game 3. So there will be some adjustments made. But ultimately, I just like the Warriors in this third game. I think it's nip and tuck. It's wire to wire. But I think ultimately they retake the lead of the series 2-1. So finally, I want to switch over to the MLB. I don't talk about Major League Baseball a whole lot, but I did think it was interesting that yesterday I got a notification that the Los Angeles Angels have officially fired their manager, Joe Maddon. Now, Joe Maddon's obviously been a part of this organization 2 stints. The first stint came 1996. He was there for just a handful of games, 8-for-14 overall record. Then he stayed in 1999 for a season, not even a full season, but he was 19-10 in about 29 games. And now in this second stint, this is about 2.5 years in his second stint, and they've got a 27-29 record. Now, again, for some context, in his first year as the manager in this second stint, they were 26-34 in the condensed MLB season. Last year, after a full season, they were 77-85. And as I mentioned, they're currently 27-29, second best record in the AL West, but they're about 9 games back of the Houston Astros for the lead in the AL West. Now, they started off before this 12-game losing streak. They were 27-17, which obviously is a well above 500 record. But the thing that's interesting about managers in baseball, and especially one like Joe Maddon, who's 68, is he's had a track record of winning everywhere he's been. As I mentioned, he began his career with the Angels. The sample size was extremely small, but in those 2 brief opportunities in those seasons, he was above 500. He had a winning record with the Tampa Bay Rays for 9 seasons. That included 4 trips to the postseason and 1 appearance in the World Series in 2008. Then he was the head skipper for the Chicago Cubs. I went to Wisconsin at the time when a lot of my friends, a lot of students were all from Chicago or suburbs of Chicago. And as obnoxious as it appeared at times, they were huge Cub fans, and it was deserving. The Cubs won the World Series for the first time In like 108 years, they won the World Series in 2016. They made 4 trips to the postseason in 5 years under Joe Maddon. So this was a guy that had proven to be a really good manager. And I think just like any sport, success, especially as a coach, hinges and is contingent on 3 things. The first thing is your stars. What kind of star players do you have? Second thing is, how do those stars perform? Because it's one thing to have the stars, but the other thing is, how do they actually execute? Do they deliver? And then the third piece of it is the coaching. How do you coach up the rest of the players, including your star players? Those are the 3 things that in any sport success relies on. And when I look at the LA Angels, I do think having some context about their losing streak matters. I think it's important to take in everything into consideration. So amidst this losing streak, they first got swept by the Toronto Blue Jays at home. Now, the Toronto Blue Jays are 33-22. They are currently just behind the New York Yankees for the AL East division. They've got a top 7 record in the MLB. So they're one of the best teams in baseball. And by the way, 3 of the 4 losses that the Angels suffered to the Toronto Blue Jays all came within 1 run or fewer. In fact, the final, their series finale, was an 11-10 victory for the Blue Jays. So clearly offense wasn't a problem in that series. You could point to pitching. You could point to other issues, some errors. So the offense wasn't a problem. So that's one series against the Toronto Blue Jays. Then they got swept on the road at Yankee Stadium against the New York Yankees, 4 straight games. Or really 3 straight games. One got canceled because of inclement weather conditions. Surprisingly, I know, New York, what are you going to do in the summer? Now, the Yankees are the best team in baseball with the best record in baseball. So is that a huge blemish on your record? I don't necessarily think so. The series that was bad was they lost 4 games to the Philadelphia Phillies. Now, you can argue the Phillies have won 6 straight games, so they're one of the hotter teams in baseball, but I still don't think, I understand those weren't good losses. But again, the problem with the Angels, and this has been the problem of the Angels for the last several years, is they rely so heavily on their 2 star players. And that's what this boils down to. They've got 2 star players, Mike Trout and Shohei Ohtani. And every single offseason, they have repeatedly failed as an organization to buffer the rest of the team. They've got these 2 stars, but how they have filled out the rest of the roster has been lacking, has been insufficient. And that's the problem, is if those 2 guys aren't playing well, and unfortunately for the Angels, during this losing streak, those 2 guys have been uncharacteristically bad, you're not going to win games. During that stretch, Mike Trout's been batting like 118 in 48 plate appearances. Shohei Ohtani's been batting about 180 over the losing streak. And as a pitcher, he hasn't been pitching well in this streak. He's 0 for 4 in his 4 starts with a 5.14 ERA. Now, this is not to take a swipe at those 2 guys who are phenomenal. The reality is they're in a little bit of a slump at the moment. And unfortunately, the Angels don't have the depth on their team to rally around that and still carry the team and lift them up. And that's why they've been losing games. So do I think that it's all Joe Maddon's fault that guys aren't hitting? No, at some point, guys got to be more accountable, and you have to be able to connect the barrel with the bat. I mean, it's just the barrel of the bat's got to be able to connect with the ball at some point. And I do think, listen, there are certainly examples in which a change of scenery for a coach or a new coach, new voice comes in. It obviously changes the outlook of the team. But you just look at the Boston Celtics in this past season with Ime Udoka, they were 23-24 at one point. They didn't fire Udoka. Now, granted, this was his first season. It was different. Maddon, this is 2.5 years at the helm. And now the Boston Celtics are in the NBA Finals. Now, I'm not saying that Joe Maddon would have turned it around like that, but if they sported a record of 27-17 not too long ago, who's to say they couldn't snap out of this funk and all of a sudden go on a 10-game win streak of their own? And the one thing we know about baseball is it is such a fickle and transient sport, because momentum and finding some rhythm, finding some consistency, it's hard to come by, and it's a very ephemeral thing. You can lose it in an instant, because with the volume and the frequency of the games, baseball is one of those sports where you either have to have the shortest memory, and if you are in a slump, you can immediately wake up out of it the next day, or if you are in a slump, you're almost trying to battle out of quicksand, because every day you wake up, you've got another game and you've got no time to respond to how you performed the night before. You have no time to really make many adjustments because you got to go out and play a game. So it's kind of this catch-22 where on the one hand you have an opportunity for redemption, but on the other hand you have the opportunity for repeated failure because of the frequency of games. And so it's one of those sports where I don't think it's important. I don't think you can make impulsive decisions like this. Obviously, this wasn't an impulsive decision. I just would have preferred that they had given Joe Maddon at least half the season just to see what he could do. I understand that right now they've already played 56 games, but it's an 162 game schedule. At least give the guy till about 80 games to see what you want to do. That's what that would be my preference. Obviously, they decided not to do that, and it is what it is. But I just think it's one of those sports where you can struggle back to back days in a row. It just is part of the game, and I don't blame all of this on Joe Maddon. His two star players and the rest of the team have to play better. Maybe a new voice will change that. Maybe it won't. But I think too often coaches take the fall for athletes and their lack of producing, their lack of production. That's truthfully what I think. Okay, final topic, my Malkin's moments. I have some great Malkin's moments for you. So, as I mentioned, the Walton Penner family officially bought the Denver Broncos for a U.S. sports franchise record $4.65 billion. It was an incredible announcement and notification that finally happened. It feels like we had been waiting just patiently for this news to break, and it finally did. So major congratulations to their family and to the Pat Bowlen and Joe Ellis families as well for their ability to sell it at such a high price. Shout out to them. So the Texas Rangers, they've got a guy, Marcus Semien, who had an historic day yesterday. So the Texas Rangers played a doubleheader against the Cleveland Guardians. They won the first game 6-3. They lost the second one 3-6. But Trevor Semien had an historic day. He collected 7 hits and 3 home runs all in the same day. Now, just for some context, again, because it was a doubleheader. So he's the first player with 7 hits and 3 home runs in the same day since Joe Morgan did it in 1973. It's been nearly 49 years since this last happened, July 31st, specifically in 1973. So just about 49 years. He tied a franchise record for hits in the doubleheader, joining Marlon Beard, who did it on September 8th in 2009. And of course, funny enough, it happened at the time they were called the Cleveland Indians. So the same team, same organization. Now they're obviously called the Guardians. And so he joined Marlon Beard and he joined the Washington Senators. Again, they're no longer the Washington Senators. They're now the Minnesota Twins. But he joined Washington Senators' Fred Valentine, who did it on July 26, 1966, versus the Boston Red Sox, which is major, major accomplishment. And not to mention for Simeon, he's also just the second Ranger to hit 3 home runs in a doubleheader along with Al Oliver in 1980. So he is in some rarefied air, some special company, and you deserve to be if you're going to go 7 hits and 3 home runs in a doubleheader single day, which is incredible. Absolutely sensational. Speaking of sensational, big shout out to Coco Gauff. What a French Open tournament she had. The American, who was just 18 years of age. Yes, unfortunately, she lost to Iga Swiatek, the #1 player in the world in straight sets, 6-1, 6-3. But she became the youngest American to reach a Grand Slam final since Serena Williams did it in 1999. And obviously we know what type of career Serena Williams has gone on to have, and the Williams sisters have gone on to have. So if that is any perhaps foreshadowing for what may be the future for Coco Gauff, then she's got a bright future ahead. Shout out to Aaron Judge, because last week he became the first player in the majors to hit 200 home runs. Now he actually has 22, which is leading the MLB. Just behind him, Yordan Alvarez has got 17, so he's up 5 on him. Mookie Betts has 16. Pete Alonso has 16 as well. And Anthony Rizzo, his own teammate, has got 14. But obviously Aaron Judge, this is a big year for him because he's got the opportunity to potentially sign a massive contract in the offseason, and he's been playing like a superstar, which he is. The Yankees are rolling. They're the best team in baseball right now. 40-15 is their record. They're the only team that has already eclipsed the 40-win mark of the season, which is impressive. They're on a torrid pace, and he's a big reason why. He is the catalyst right now. And it's great when the Yankees, who have won like 27 world championships, are playing at a high level and are an elite team. It feels like they've been kind of knocking on the door for several years. We'll see if this is one of those seasons for him. It's certainly looking like it, and he's having a phenomenal year. And finally, Billy Horschel won the 2022 Memorial Golf Championship over the weekend. He finished -13 for the tournament, won by 4 strokes. It was his 7th PGA Tour win, and obviously Memorial is a big tournament. Now, on another time, I'll talk about the Live Saudi-backed golf tournament and all the reports of numerous star golf players now leaving for that league. Today is not that day. So shout out, though, once again to Billy Horschel and the other people that were on my Malkin's Moments. That's all the time that I got for today. Thank you so much for joining me right here on Morning Joe every single Monday and Wednesday morning, 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 to 11 Central, and 8 to 9 a.m. Pacific. Make sure to subscribe to my YouTube page, Morning Joe, J-O with Jonah Malkin on YouTube. Follow me on Twitter at Jonah_Malkin or at morning_Joe_JMalk97 on Instagram, and Jonah Malkin on TikTok. Thanks so much. And as always, have a lovely rest of your morning.